Okay, we're going to begin Iowa City City Council's work session for Tuesday, January the 8th, 2019. And the first topic is the fiscal year 2020 budget discussion. As you all know, on January the 7th, Jeff sent us a memo summarizing a few key outcomes of our budget discussion last Saturday. And according to that summary, there are 7 actions we need to confirm or discuss, make a decision about. So I'm thinking we'll go through them one at a time, from the top down to the bottom. And then if there are other items you want to discuss, bring them up after we do that. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Sure.
Okey doke. Oops. What are you doing there, Eleanor?
Is that all it takes?
Okay, the first item is adding $140,000 to the NDS budget for the South District Home Ownership Program. Jeff, do you want to elaborate on that in any way? And then does anybody want to make sort of an opening comment about it?
Well, this is a conversation that you had at your last work session, and you gave staff direction to do this. We just didn't get an opportunity to put it in the budget. Basically, the budget was already printed when you gave us that direction. So this one and the next one, which is the solar at Terry Trueblood, we're going off your previous direction and putting those in the budget, but you can certainly change your mind tonight if you'd like to.
I don't feel like changing my mind. I don't know about others.
I think, yeah, we already talked about 140 for the South District, just like as a part of the university program, and I guess this is what should come from the general fund, and I'm still for it.
I guess my question would be clarification. Are we talking about this being a different use of university funds in terms of we've talked about maybe changing that program and focusing it more in other areas, or are we talking about $140,000 in addition to university funds? I just think,
Right.
I think we need to be really clear on that because I think there might not be clarity.
Right, so that relates to the third item, funding for the university program, as well as modification of the program parameters, right?
So
Yeah.
the current fiscal year is fiscal year 19. The university dollars are committed. There's no more university dollars. The budget proposal for fiscal year 20 has one university home in it. It's essentially an outlay of $60,000. This would be in addition to that.
I really think that we can add this to it since it's going to come out from the 2.95 million. It's still from the general fund. We can add it to the university because I really like the idea of Tracy Hatches when she said that we can modify the university program and just add that money since we already talked about it last time. And even though I understand you're proposing only one house this year, which is 60,000, we can just add this to it. It will be like 200, but we know that 140 will be, assigned to South District.
Agree. You were thinking something different?
I just want clarification. I just want to make sure that we're all understanding it the same and on the same page with what we're saying we agree or don't agree with.
Yeah, so the idea is to have $200,000 in the university line, with 140 of that being spent on the South District partnership.
Yep.
That's what I hear Maz kind of saying.
Sure. I guess for clarification on our end, though, we're looking at the additional 140. We're using surplus dollars to fund that, so it's a one-time expense. Now, depending on the success of the program, we may decide to make it permanent or extend it at least several years, but for now, the surplus dollars that are going to get us to 200 in that line, those are one-time funds.
Speaking only for myself, I guess the way that I'm sort of viewing this is I think a year or two ago, I'd mentioned the possibility of, is there any way we could look at homes other than single family? Could we explore a duplex and those sorts of things? So the way I'm looking at for this year is Maz has proposed sort of a modification in terms of how we're doing the university program. I think we can review and assess how that works out, and then going into the next council budgeting session, council can sort of decide whether they want to have, there are elements of the existing program I really like, which we're not really going to discuss at all tonight, but I think here this is a modification or an innovation, so let's see how it goes, and then reevaluate at the end of the year.
Yes.
Anyone else want to add some comment about that? Well, seems to me we have a decision here, Jeff. Okay. Sorry, my voice is really soft again tonight. It must be an affliction. Yeah,
The solar at Terry Trueblood, if you recall from the solar feasibility study, the consultants estimated that the kind of the right size for the usage out at Terry Trueblood was a $60,000 roughly solar array. You can see that we've padded that number a little bit. Those were really preliminary estimates. I'm a little concerned that they may be a little low. Plus, the council indicated a desire to incorporate some educational materials with that, and there may be some design elements from Terry Trueblood, from the lodge, that we want to incorporate into the solar. So that's why you're seeing a little bit higher number there. I just wanted to be pretty conservative going into the design of that solar array.
yeah. Yeah, well, I'm on board with that. How about the rest of you?
Me too, yeah.
Okay.
I think we also get a lot of bang for a buck for this particular project.
Visibility?
Yeah, the visibility.
Yep.
All right, the third item was, as I just mentioned, funding for the university program. Do we need to discuss this any further, given what we just decided?
I'm encouraged to know that Tracy Highshoe is going to be looking at this in the future and making it, a viable program, or revamping it, I think, for our community. So, yeah, I'm encouraged by that.
Well, I want to make sure that Tracy and other staff members understand what we're thinking and that we're clear about what we're thinking.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Tracy, would you feel comfortable in coming up? And if you have any
Question.
confusion or questions or need clarification, maybe you could express that.
What's a specific question?
Let me start,
Yeah.
and then Tracy, you could fill in some of the details. Your strategic plan, you asked staff to evaluate all of the different programs where we're investing into private housing stock. So that is University and GRIP and all the various rehab facade programs that we have. So that's part of what Tracy and her staff are doing right now. That's what she alluded to on Saturday. We're going to come back with some recommendations. There's lots of changes since University was first adopted, the biggest one being the rental cap. And so we are going to recommend some changes to how we pursue University. And you're seeing, you see a little bit of that with the South District, right? We're borrowing some concepts and we're moving it around. But if you want to elaborate on what you're thinking or what you talked about on Saturday, that's fine.
I think what we're looking at is, we've met a lot of the original goals that we set up for the university program. And if what I hear from the council is wanting to shift more towards affordability, and if affordability is the main goal going in the future, we can explore other types like duplex. That's what we're doing on the Taylor Davis, that make it affordable. These are homes that are 1960s, 70s, 1980s. They're not 100-year homes. We're not putting a low-income homeowner in a 100-year-old home, which we all know homeowners, something always goes wrong. And if you have a 100-year-old home, there's just more potential. So we're looking at what areas of town that we can provide, put more reinvestment in neighborhoods to get people that can buy homes in these neighborhoods, and they can stay. That'll be stable neighborhoods, and that they'll be able to afford it. So if in year 4 or year 10 something goes, you need a new roof, the HVAC goes bad, that they have the money they can afford. So we're going to start looking at where we can put our affordable housing dollars, whether that might be in different neighborhoods in the university. I did talk to the university lenders that we work with, and they were okay with moving locations, especially if we still concentrate on low to moderate income homeowners. So we'll look at that. We'll look at rental rehab programs. So we might be looking at a shift of how we spend our money, still encouraging LIHTC projects, but for things that are not LIHTC, do we invest more in rental rehab where people who have low incomes are already living? And how do we improve their housing quality in their neighborhoods? And these might be neighborhoods that we've not reinvested a lot of money in over the last few years. Mm-hmm. So that's coming.
Okay, good deal. Sounds great.
Sound good.
At least in terms of where I'm coming from, at least in terms of what I view this as an innovation or an expansion of the existing program, but I would like to keep a certain part of the program as is. And I don't know whether we have enough time to discuss about that, but I do like the existing program as it is. I view this, what we're doing for this year, as a way to improve and make sure that we're allowing opportunity for different income levels. But I think certain part of it, so I'd like to keep part of it the way it is, and then add or expand with other income levels is sort of what at least I'm coming from, and I don't know how people feel about that, but that's at least where I'm coming from, is sort of expand but keep at least the core as is.
I really understand what you're saying, Rockne, but I disagree with you on this. We sold 69 university houses at that programs. We need to do more in affordable housing. For now, I really want you to focus on affordability right now, because we've done a lot on that side. You know, for people who are 80% of area median income, we've done a lot. And we need to focus on the people who their income is 30% of the area median income. I really would like the university city to be affordable program right now. Think of a way of, as you just said, toward affordability. You know, and maybe after we do more here, and we can become, after that, we can do something together, so we can rise everything together. But for affordable housing, yeah, we done something. I don't want to say just like all the time, but you know, we done something, but we have not done a lot on like 30% of the area median income or 50%, 40%. Let us do more in this area for the next coming year, and after that, maybe we can. It's only now $200 for this year. It's not gonna do like here and there at the same time. This is not too much money. My idea is really to focus on affordability right now. I don't know what my fellow councils say, but that's my idea.
What I'd like to see us do is, given that what our discussion is tonight is actually the budget, if we, and I think we are in agreement on staying with the $60,000 that staff already has in the budget for university, and if we're in agreement on the $140,000 additional for the South District, then let's move on tonight, now that we've agreed on the numbers, and once Tracy and staff are ready to come back with more specific ideas on how they would recommend changes, then let's have that discussion then. Personally, I think we have a lot to discuss to get through the budget tonight.
Yep, agreed.
I agree.
Okay.
Thanks, Tracy. Okay, so that gets us to the fourth item, which is additional allocation of funds for the Affordable Housing Fund. And just to make sure everybody knows, the current draft budget recommends putting $650,000 into the Affordable Housing Fund as a line item. So the question is, should we allocate additional funds to that? What do you think?
I really think we need to leave it as it is. $1 million for affordable housing as last year. I understand that was one-time fund, but think about this money. 50% of it will go to the trust fund, the housing trust fund, and they do a lot good stuff with that. And I think if we reduce it, that means we reduce the amount that we're going to give it to them. At the same time, I know that there is 20% go somewhere else, right? Land banking or?
Land banking.
Yes, go to land banking. After that, we really don't have like a lot left. That's why I really encourage the council to do it $1 million so we can give the other agency like more money, because they're really doing great on building affordable housing right now. And if we could add more, it would be awesome. But let's do $1 million.
I think there's a couple other pieces that really fit in with this. If you go back and look at the slides that we got at the work session last Saturday, there were some key decisions in there, and I'm not sure exactly if they line up with what was in Jeff's memo, but there was, under that affordable housing, there was, increasing the embedded 650. There's adding the $140,000 for the South District homeownership program, which we have just agreed to. So that really takes the affordable housing up to $790,000 right there. That is affordable housing that we are focusing on with that. And then there are two other possibilities in there. There's an HCDC recommendation for additional LIHTC support of $200,000. And there's considering housing fellowship request for an additional LIHTC support of $150,000. Those are all affordable housing issues. So before in my mind, before we say we are or are not going to increase that 650, I think we need to discuss those individual pieces, because those are all affordable housing as well. And so if people are in support of some of those bullet items, I certainly would not agree to adding those and increasing the 650 to $1 million, because then you're up to maybe as much as 1.5.
I don't think we have before us a recommendation to add those two additional items to the budget.
They were not recommendations, but they were in the PowerPoint that we got on Saturday
Yes,
as key decisions.
I have it, yeah.
Staff has not made necessarily a specific recommendation, but they were part of what Jeff certainly felt were key decisions we had to make in allocating the $2.95 million in surplus funds. And so, to me, those are affordable housing issues and points where that money would go. So to me, those should be discussed in the context of increasing the 650, because it's all affordable housing money.
Just to clarify with council, the email recap that I send after each of the meetings just has the bullet, additional allocation of funds for affordable housing. I should have probably broken that out more, but Councilor Mims is right. That's the general allocation, and then there's the two pending requests, one of which is in your one of your information packets, your 1227 information packet. That's the HCDC recommendation for $200,000. The request by the Housing Fellowship for $150 is working its way through staff. So they've approached staff about it. We're working with them on a proposal to bring to you. It's not to you yet, but it's coming.
Jeff, is that in addition to the 650, or would that come out of the 650?
In addition.
Okay.
It should be addition, I think. You know, I understand what you're coming from, Susan, but when the last time we done something like this? You know, like years ago, we haven't done anything like this, like, you know, just like putting a lot of money, like, I mean, these items, 3 or 4 items together. And even if you add this money, it's not that much. We are, yes, this time maybe we're doing more than one item toward affordable housing, but this is crisis that being waiting forever. Those people are paying tax as any like anyone in this city, and they never get as much as the other people get. Right now, I think we need to increase the affordable housing, like 1 million, and to do also those programs together. All of them, we can do it. All of it is going to be like, I guess, maybe beside the 1 million, all of them will be like 350 and 140, 490, almost 400. It's not that much.
I think when I look at the budget and look at some of the key things that we talked about, and I just look at, again, from this slide, one of the major things that hit me when we went through that budget presentation on Saturday is that the projections are that in 4 years, our general fund revenues are going to be less than our general fund expenses. And so, to me, it's crucially important that we continue to build reserves for a lot of different things, and that includes to be able to fund those general fund expenses, but also putting some money, and I'll kind of just jump into it, I guess, at this point, is that municipal facility reserve. We have major issues there that we're never going to be, we're going to need a new fire station or a new police station for $20 million. We need a new transit building for probably $20 million. So to say that we should just continue spending one-time dollars, as a city, we've put a lot of money, and I'm proud of it, in terms of affordable housing. We're doing a lot in terms of the homeless with shelter house, et cetera, winter shelter. I don't think we can just keep, it's on the list, so we just need to add. I think we have to, other things we also have to plan for.
Well, I would say I would support the idea of putting $1 million into the Affordable Housing Fund instead of $650 for the forthcoming fiscal year. I don't know what that means with regard to the $200,000 and $150,000 decisions, because we have not made them. And with regard to that particular point, the 200 and 150, were you thinking that money would come out of the current fiscal year or the forthcoming fiscal year?
I certainly for the sand project out on Herbert Hoover, that could come out of next fiscal year. There may be a need to take the Del Rey money out of this fiscal year, but I think that could probably float to next fiscal year too. One thing I did want to mention again, I mentioned this on Saturday. It's if you have the slides, I know some of you are still looking at those budget slides. One of the options for funding the 2 additional requests is to take those from the Affordable Housing Fund, and we have a pot of money built up in the land banking fund that we have not used. So if you're uncomfortable adding more general fund dollars beyond the $1 million that's being discussed here, you could take it from the land banking fund. And I'll foreshadow some of the recommendations that Tracy alluded to staff making here. We will be recommending some changes to the distribution of the Affordable Housing Fund, and that's discussion down the road, but we're likely to move, or at least recommend that the city move away from land banking, as we've talked about, and we've shared some articles with you, trying to tackle the affordable housing problem through new construction is very expensive, and I don't know if we're making as much progress as we can with that particular part of the plan. So our recommendation is going to be to shift those land banking funds to lower cost initiatives like rental rehab and things of that nature. So that's why I'm suggesting you could tap into that land banking fund for those 2 requests.
I would like to punt pending consideration of the capital improvement project budget, and then 2, I think if we wait a little, I think last year we waited until we did the capital improvement project before we actually made substantive modifications to the budget, and then hopefully, a month out, 2 or 3 weeks out, hopefully have a little bit better sense of what, legislative session is going to go in pretty soon. What is going to happen with the backfill? What are we hearing about that? So I would want to punt on this pending resolution of the capital improvement budget.
I really think we have 2.9 million for the surplus right now, and we can use all this money from that. This money now is being for the council to make a decision about it. If we don't fund this, what are we going to fund?
Well, let's see what John, Bruce, and Pauline have to say.
I think I'm comfortable with the way it's easiest for me to think about this would be to increase the Affordable Housing Fund to $1 million and then set aside the other things that Susan mentioned as separate items. As Jeff mentioned, we do have some funds that are existing in our Affordable Housing Fund that may be reallocated. So I think, adding the $1 million, adding the $350 to bring the addition to the fund to $1 million, I think is a good starting point.
For me, I think about housing justice and affordability. I think in our community, we've done a lot, but there still needs to be a lot done. And so I would really be in support of $1 million for affordable housing. The 200 and the 150, using the funds from the land banking. And then the 140, since we talked about this program as being maybe a trial program, as well as, the University City program is kind of coming to, I guess, a pivotal point where we're only doing one house this upcoming year for $60,000. So the 140, I really, believe that should not come out of the affordable housing million or the 650 at this point. So I am, really supportive of $1 million for affordable housing, as well as the 200 and the 150 coming from the land banking, and the 140 either general fund or, it can probably come from the land banking as well.
Okay, but right now, tonight, we're
Yes.
not making a decision about the 200 and 150.
Sure.
We'll consider those separately.
Sure.
All right.
At least now for $1 million for affordable housing.
last time around, I believe we were split on this, and we went with agreeing on $750,000 and then waiting to see what would happen with the backfill to go up to $1 million. And we saw that it wasn't going to be an issue, and so we wound up going to $1 million. So my thought would be we might as well go with $1 million. With being clear on the distribution of it. I mean, million's a lot, and how is that going to be distributed? You know, what affordable housing is important. So, you know, what are we going to do with that $1 million? That's a lot. How is it going to be divided to assist with affordable housing? And then those others can be with the land banking funds.
Okay, I think there's majority support for putting $1 million into the Affordable Housing Fund. Just to foreshadow some things, we need to be clear that our decisions do not determine what future councils will decide with regard to future budgets. So there's no assurance that any future council will continue a $1 million investment into affordable housing or almost anything else, right? So we just need to be clear about that. Okay. Let's move on then to the Sanksay Gilmore House and funding for its relocation. Well, this is a tricky topic. So I want to say a few things about this because I've had some conversations in the past with President Harold, members of Gloria Day, the affordable, with our historic preservation, Friends of Historic Preservation, and the Commission, and so on. So there's a backstory to all this. First thing is, this is the oldest residential house in Iowa City, dating back to prior to 1843. It's an important house. It's part of our historic legacy and so on. But moving the house even just across the street would, according to the memo we got from Jessica, be very expensive. Perhaps as much as $550,000 just to move it, though I suspect it would be less than that, maybe significantly less, just because it's only going across the street instead of going to Ronald Street or going to North Gilbert Street. Nonetheless, there would be a significant cost for that. And then if we refurbish the building, if we intended to do that now, that might cost as much as $650,000, according to Jessica's memo. But even that, I suspect, is probably a high estimate. Nonetheless, there would also be the $1 million in opportunity costs if we just moved it across the street into the parking lot. So the cost will be high, even if it won't be as high as sort of the maximum numbers that Jessica laid out for us. And whatever they are, they would be significantly higher than $330,000, which is in the current draft budget. So there's some complexity there. And one could ask this question: as important as the building is preserving the building and moving it across the street worth perhaps as much as $2 million? That's sort of a bottom line question. And I feel very antsy about that. But I want to see if we can investigate something further here. By far, the best solution is to keep the building exactly where it is, for all sorts of reasons: financially, structurally, historic character, et cetera. But when we first met with officials from the university quite a long time ago now, they were very clear about not wanting to keep the building and need to have the university put money into refurbishing it and reusing it and preserving it and all that kind of stuff. So they have been pretty clear, as clear as they can be, that if it's not moved by, I guess, August the 1st, I think that's the deadline, it will be demolished. So what I wonder about, I think maybe the situation's changed at the university a little bit, and Jeff, maybe you know a little bit more about that than I do, But originally, they were intending to build a new business school structure there, and I think they've backed off from that. So I'm not sure, I don't know if they have any plans for the site at all. So that makes me wonder whether we could approach them and say, we would encourage you to preserve the building, and then say something like this: we might offer to purchase the property and the building. Cost would be much less than the alternatives. Or we would be willing to invest some amount of money into its preservation if the university maintains it. That would be far less for us. So I'm suggesting that we approach the university about those possibilities and see what comes of that before we make any firm decision about, whether to try to move the building at some large cost. What do y'all think?
I agree with you, Jim. I think, I feel that the city council and staff have done everything we can to come up with ways to address how to preserve this building. And now we have a cost that was unforeseen that, in my view, compels me to ask or suggest and urge that we reconsider, have an opportunity to have conversations with the university, not simply the city, but members of the community, to see if there are ways in which we can resolve this. And it does seem, I think, from a cost standpoint and historic preservation, keeping it where it is would be probably the preferred alternative. Short of that, if we need to move it, my inclination would be to move it to the Gilbert Street property adjacent to Haunted Bookshop. From my standpoint, that seems to be another option that is not perfect. None of the options are perfect, it seems. There are no easy answers to this question. But my feeling was that is that the Gilbert site would strengthen Northside Marketplace. It would give stability to that edge of the commercial district. I think it would give a higher visibility to what is a very significant historic structure. Granted, it would not be in its original location, but it would be more visible, and it would be in a place that, in my view, has had less lost to it in terms of context. So, in any event, I think I would think it's at this time appropriate to approach the university and see what, with the new information, how we move forward.
I would agree. I think as we all look at this cost, it's kind of sticker shock. And if there's any possible way of resolving it, why would we not go ahead and have some more conversation? I don't know if there's any chances, but what do we have to lose? So.
That's what I would hope too. If you think there's any hope at all in speaking with the university and dealing with them, I think the less disruptive would be to leave it where it is, if we could possibly, if the university would agree with that, and if we could partner with them on the cost of things, that would be the best option.
I guess I have one question directed towards Jeff. I don't know if I saw this in the memo. If we did move it across the street and just sort of sell it arm's length to landmark it and then sell it, do we have any sense of what it would appraise for if it were fully refurbished? Because I think we have the sticker shock, but if we were to landmark it and sell it, our net price would be what it would be. I mean, if we were able to sell it to an arm's length buyer, it may be that there's not much of a market for that. But do we have that information? They'd be able to use it for any. Okay.
I don't, and I'd hesitate to even venture a guess without doing a little work
Okay.
on that, yeah.
So I guess I'd like to get more feedback from the university, and if it's not too time-intensive for staff, to at least think about just sort of an arm's length landmark and sale to whichever buyer would want to do it. I would like to at least get that information, because if we could sell it for a significant amount of money, then we'd be looking at really that net difference between what we'd be putting into it. We may have to sell it at a loss, but if we sold it at a significant loss, we realize we're going to put in some money anyway. At least be nice to have that information, and realizing that you're just looking at a ballpark for purposes of our budgeting.
Jeff, I don't know if you want to comment any on the suggestion I made, which seems to have gotten some support.
I think it's worth a shot. Yeah. I suggest that you and I ask President Harold for a meeting and whatever staff that he feels is important, but I think your presence would help in that conversation.
Okay. All right. Are we agreed that's the way we will
Yeah,
proceed?
that's reasonable, Jim.
So for the moment, we'll leave 330 in the budget, I guess, just
Yep.
as a placeholder? Okey doke. Which brings us to public art. So the next topic is funding for the Public Art Advisory Commission budget. Yeah, anybody want to make an opening comment on this?
I'd like to ask Jeff to, because I know he and I have had the conversation, and he may have had it with other counselors, just to kind of talk about all the different ways in which the city spends money on art, culture, and different kinds of art, because I think we spend a lot more money than a lot of people realize, but just in different categories of art. And so I think that'd be helpful, if you don't mind, Jeff.
Sure. Yeah, the focus of the conversation really has been on one line item in our budget, which is the Public Art Advisory Commission budget. Currently, that budget sits at $25,000, and as folks have pointed up over the years, it's been as high as $100,000 or more, and as low as, I think, $3,000. But the city invests in arts in multiple different ways outside of that one line item, and you all are familiar with lots of those because some of those you approve. So whether it's operational supports for some of our arts organizations like Film Scene, Riverside Theater, the Englert, those are annual contributions that we make. You just committed $1 million over a couple of years to the renovation of the Englert and the renovation of the original Film Scene building. We have funding that goes to Summer of the Arts at roughly $70,000 a year. And then we also may have departments that have public art incorporated into some of the work that they do. So for example, I believe last year's farmers market budget had some dollars in it for a mural project. The recently completed Harrison Street parking deck, there was an artist component to that, so there was our kind of art built into the design there. We have festival support, again, like Mission Creek. We're collaborating with Hancher on an event a couple years out called the Big Splash. So that's kind of an arts festival along the river. Those are all various different ways that we support the arts.
Thank you. The other thing, and I think Jeff made these comments last Saturday, and it kind of hit me as I was listening to it, was the idea that essentially we've been asked for more money, but they haven't necessarily given us a plan for how they want, why they need it or how they want to use it. And when I sat there and listened and kind of heard Jeff recap all the different ways that we spend money on the arts in lots of festivals and different, it's not all public art, obviously, but lots of different ways. And then the idea of give us money for the sake of giving us money without a really distinct strategic plan or long-range ideas of why it's needed and how they're going to use it, then I came away from that feeling like, I'd rather have the plan first of what is it you're really trying to do that we're not able to do right now through that Public Art Commission. Give us that plan, then come back and ask us for money, and let's consider it in that regard rather than just handing out money with not any real idea of why they feel it's needed or how it would be used. So.
I agree. I did raise that question with Thomas. a few weeks ago, and his response was that, the funding would become available in summer, July of this year, and his feeling was that that plan, that way in which this would be implemented, would be developed between now and then. So I think I think Jeff's comment is certainly a very appropriate one, and I think Thomas's response, which was not directed at Jeff, but that I spoke with him about, seems like a reasonable way of addressing that issue. I think the idea that we wouldn't release, the funds would only become available once that plan is in place. So we do need that plan in place before we give the go-ahead in terms of the public art program. So that's one thing. And the other, I would say, is that is really more who is leading this effort. I mean, we have some great leaders at the Englert, at Film Scene, Hansher. I think we have in Thomas a remarkable leader in terms of visual arts. And he's been performing in that way for 5 years, I want to say. I mean, he has a considerable track record in terms of generating art in the community that has been very well received. So in my view, I view this as he's an entrepreneur of the arts. I mean, he is truly transforming, along with other artists, the face of Iowa City, and doing it in a way. What he has also emphasized, and I think the best example I can think of is the Goosetown mural, expanding the envelope geographically in terms of the reach of the public art program. So I personally feel he has given us an indication of what's possible. He has a strong vision. He's part of a larger group that's moving forward with this. So I feel that it's something that the council should support, pending, of course, the development of that, the plan for how we would be spending the funds.
So are you recommending that we put into the budget a specified amount of money contingent upon successful development of a
Yes,
plan about
right.
how it would be used?
Right.
Do you have a dollar figure in mind?
Well, they had a figure,
$145,000.
$145,000. I mean, one reason I'd asked Thomas was I was concerned that the development of the program might actually take more than the time between now and July 1, and would it be possible to even implement that level of funding within the next fiscal year? He said that he felt that the plan could be developed easily within the time frame before the fiscal year starts. I would say we could put in his request. It may not be what actually ends up being expended. Maybe view it as a not to exceed amount. Or it could be done in phases. I mean, it could be 50% this year and then the full amount in a subsequent year.
I suggest that we do right now we're at 25,000, correct? I suggest we do an additional 25,000. Susan, you bring up a lot of really good points, and I think something that we all sort of forget sometimes is before we do something new, let's identify existing arts programming. I think that was a really good point that you made, and I think obviously we want to make sure that there's a plan. But I think to your point, John, you brought up the question of track record, not only of Thomas, but everyone in the arts community that has advocated on this. Nearly everyone that I've talked to or at least seen presented has a proven track record. So I have the confidence as of right now that we could do a $25,000 increase right now to $50,000, right? They can make a plan and, maybe we can modify it at another point. But I think for me, I think they've made their case. This is a reasonable amount. I think in the past, like for example, local foods, I think we bumped it up 25,000 after our first year of almost sort of a pilot. I think they've made that. And I think as to film scene and these are sort of arts things, I think to me that's a little bit apples and oranges. I think public art is I think he's talking visual art,
It's a very
sculpture.
it's a different
I mean, to me it's like saying, are we going to put Bike Fest? Let's evaluate our roads. I view them as two different things. So I think they've made their case as for a $25,000 increase to 50. And then we'd, of course, like to see the plan if they want to do any modifications for subsequent years. But I'm very confident, based upon what we've heard, that this money is going to be well spent. And I don't think anyone better than Thomas, and I think other people that have worked on the projects that he's been involved with, they're going to make that money go really far. Final point is, I'm also very confident that they have a sensitive ear to making sure that it's distributed in other parts of the community as opposed to just downtown. So at least that's where I'm coming from.
I agree with Rockne on that, maybe bumping it up to the 50,000, so bumping it up 25,000. I mean, they were very bold in coming before us and gave a very emotional plea, but as you've all said, not without a real specific plan. So if we can bump it up, double it, and see what they do with that amount of money, then perhaps consider in future years bumping it up even more.
I support doubling too, yeah.
What I've seen around town with the public art recently has been phenomenal. One of the things that I think about when we're talking about public art and reimbursements, just being a musician a little bit, sometimes I think it's underappreciated, the work that people do, and it's always expected to be done at a cheap cost. Mm-hmm. And so the 140, although I know that's a lot, or his request was a 150. 145. I'm comfortable with the 25,000, but I also just want to make a point that, if we do that, I don't, we're increasing potentially the arts throughout our community. I think we do need a plan to see exactly what it's for. Mm-hmm. I think that's the missing link here, at least for me. And so I'll definitely support the 25 or the 50,000 right now in the budget. And I just hope that in the future we'll get something that'll be a little more sustainable for us to make, something more presentable for us to really make a good decision on the amount that we're allocating.
Well, the thing I like most about Thomas Agrin's presentation, which I thought was terrific, was its emphasis on how visual arts can be part of community building throughout the city, in the various neighborhoods and so on. So I really like the ambition. And there are all sorts of details at the end of the memo that is in our packet about actions they think need to be taken. All those can be woven together to become part of a plan. But I need to see more substance to the plan about how funds would be spent. I'd also like to see the proposal come from the Public Arts Advisory Committee, not from a subcommittee, because I don't know what the overall committee thinks. I'd like to hear about that. And I think it would be, from my point of view, it would be good if they would couch the plan in relation to our strategic plan, especially those core ideas about inclusivity, justice, and sustainability. I think they can do that very easily, especially Thomas. I mean, he's got clear ideas about this and has a really good track record on it. But those are some things I'd like to see. So an additional 25,000 is okay with me, but we got to think about the timing of that too, because we're talking about money that would start flowing on July the 1st. Mm-hmm. So between now and then, I imagine they would probably be developing a plan. Mm-hmm. But they'd have they'd have 25,000 more to kind of commit to it. That could be a stepping stone to something much more consistent with with the long-term ambition expressed in Thomas's memorandum, which may well be a great idea. But I'd like to take it in steps.
Yep.
So
I agree.
Yeah, so I guess I'm on board with an additional 25,000 for the forthcoming year.
And just a couple of points. I think it's important that I know there's a feeling that the plan can be brought together pretty quickly, but we are a public body. We do value that public input. So, I don't know that the commission needs to rush to get it done before July 1st. We won't use that money and reallocate it. So I think I'll urge them to take their time with the plan and make sure that if this program is really to go out and build community in neighborhoods, they need to engage those neighborhoods from the planning standpoint too. So we'll encourage that. And then what I'd like to do is I'm hesitant to increase this budget with our one-time funds. Because I don't think you want this budget to go up and down, and certainly if we're going to adopt a master plan, I mean, what we've really tried to do with all of your master plans is build sustainable funding sources. We finally got there with affordable housing with this budget, maybe not at the level we want to, but we're getting there. So I'd like to probably reallocate some of our economic development budget, and I think those that have supported the increase have made a good pitch that this is really, this is economic development. Specifically, I'm thinking of the future of the Building Change program. We had a good discussion about that at our last meeting. We do have $150,000 in that for that program for fiscal year 20, as well as this current fiscal year. I'd probably be inclined to take 25 from that program and put that in the public art budget, just because that is a sustainable funding source. And then at least we have a baseline for that budget going forward. We can add to it if resources allow for fiscal year 21, but we're not going to be in a situation, or we shouldn't be in a situation in which we increase it to 50 with one-time funds and then find ourselves struggling in 21 to maintain it at that level.
What was that program again, Jeff?
Building Change, the facade grant program that we talked about. So it would still largely be intact, and it's a $25,000 off a $150,000 program.
Just quick, since you brought that up, the other good part of that discussion we had is that particular program limited funds to downtown, but if we transfer it over, we would have flexibility to go throughout the entire community. So
before we
just to
offer that
clarify.
again next, you gave us the authorization to go forward with Building Change this year. Before we were to go out next year with that, we'll come back to you. Wendy's already working on it. And we'll look at retooling that or give you some options and ways to expand it beyond the downtown.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that was one of Thomas's most compelling arguments, is just the economic development piece of that. So I'm glad you brought that up, Jeff.
Okay, we're good to go on that, right?
Yes.
All right, the last item was funding to transition temporary staff that work year-round to permanent benefited positions. And I think you want to elaborate on that some.
Yeah, we really didn't have enough time to pull together information for you, so this one's going to have to push to the next meeting. But just as a reminder for those that didn't hear that discussion, we do have hourly staff. Those are non-benefited positions that work year-round for us, 25 hours or less per week. And the request from council on Saturday was to consider moving those hourly, year-round, non-benefited positions to permanent benefited positions. So what we're going to do is come up with a list, show you all the positions that fall in that category, and then try to give you a cost estimate for moving those up to a permanent benefited positions. We just didn't have time to do that between Saturday and today.
That sounds good to me, but there's no way we can make a decision without facts that are relevant to the question.
I just have one question. Will they be going to full-time, 40-hour week status? They will be remaining
Not
where they are?
necessarily, no.
Part-time.
No, it could be part-time, but since they work, they deserve to have a benefit just like any city employees that will work around the year. Then if you work there around the year and you just work hourly, you don't have any benefit, that's not fair. That's not like good practice by the city. That's why, I think we should look into those.
I personally would like to know what our union leaders think as well about the proposal. And
I can't speak on behalf of the union, but I will just note that moving the employees to a benefited position would make all of those employees union employees. So
Good.
we're still working on what the numbers are, and we're going to reach out to our departments to identify kind of those classifications of the employees, who is here year-round, what are their hours. So we'll get back to you
Sure.
hopefully by the next meeting.
okey-doke. All right, with regard to the staff follow-up, that list of staff follow-up items, we don't need to discuss them, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Unless you think we missed something or you need clarification on that.
Okay, does anybody want to raise any other points with regard to the proposed budget? Sorry you missed it, Rockne. We had a really good discussion and, lots of feedback, and we thought it was, on the whole, just a really terrific budget, but I don't know if you have any thoughts you want to contribute.
No additional to what we just talked about.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have one, and it I think was triggered in part by the discussion, the library discussion and the elimination of fees for books that are, late on being returned. And it reminded me of a conversation I'd had recently, and it had to do with access to meeting places in Iowa City. There aren't many meeting places or meeting rooms in Iowa City which don't charge a fee, to my knowledge. And this was something that, this person I was speaking with was saying that, for certain groups, the fact that you have to pay a fee is a problem. To rent a room,
To rent a room.
To rent a room. Unfortunately, in Iowa City, what I think often in larger cities, you'll find that libraries, which often, a city will have not only a main library, but branch libraries serve as a place. There are rooms in those branch libraries where members of the community can meet without having to pay a fee. And so I don't know if this will have a budget impact or not, but I suppose it might if we were to consider looking at what facilities the city has under its jurisdiction that we would consider coming up with a fee structure where it's at least possible for certain organizations to rent the room or to occupy it, to sign up for it, reserve it, without having to pay that fee.
You're talking about the library, or you're talking about another
The
facility?
library is free,
The library is free, yeah, I was
but
thinking.
that's it, I think. There
Yeah.
are very
Yeah,
limited
and you're
options.
thinking, what,
I know, yeah.
Lodge of the Ned Ashton House of,
Yeah,
else are you thinking?
well,
Even the senior
it's
center
sort of an open
charges.
question, but I would think, the rec centers, for sure, have meeting rooms. So, just looking
$70 an hour.
into how can we, as a city, provide more opportunities for groups to be able to hold their meetings without having to pay a fee.
I agree.
I would think a starting point would, because I certainly couldn't tell you off the top of my head what meeting rooms we have available across the city or any idea of what we charge for them. So to me, having that
Excellent.
information would be a
Yeah,
starting point.
Right. I think that's certainly what I had in mind, was what is the status? What's our current practice, and what, if any, changes might be made to improve access,
what the current fees are.
and what the fee structure is?
$70 for that.
And are you just referring to meeting room for meetings only or events? Small birthday parties? Because it can go into a lot of
Right.
different events that people actually have.
Right.
So, and then I just see cleanup a part of that,
Right. Well, I know the library has, if you leave the room messy, I think there is a charge.
Sure.
So basically, I don't know that I would want to say whether it's limited only to meetings or not. Basically, I think it would be trying to expand on the opportunities that the library provides, something similar to that for our facilities.
Great idea.
Yes, I guess, especially for organization, I guess, for like nonprofit or event by like organizations. Say it could be community organizations, or it could be like a regular organization. And I think this will be a really good opportunity for community to be engaged and come and use our facility because. I don't agree for like really wedding or birthday party. Those people can pay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for communities, I guess will be a good ideas. As soon as they like prove that they are organization, nonprofit or anything, they can do that. For profit, I don't think we can do that.
Yeah, I think the language on the meeting rooms at the
Yes.
library, there is a lot of language regarding, who would qualify.
Exactly.
So it would be probably building on what we already have in place for the library.
Will be great.
I'm not sure that the library actually limits it to for not-for-profits or for organizations. I think you can
No.
be an individual.
Yes.
Yeah.
If we're talking about this is public space, I would want us to just navigate and look at making sure that, navigate and see if it's possible for individuals as well as for for-profit businesses. The name for-profit often scares people, but for-profit businesses doesn't always make a profit. And so that stigma, I think, if we can navigate, making it inclusive and not limited it to a certain segment of our population.
I think to Susan's point, I think it seems like to me this might be a nice little mini work session topic so we can get the staff memo and try to do a short work session, Jeff.
Well, we can talk about it once we get a memo from the staff. I mean, that's
Sounds good to me.
part of a work session.
So,
I would
Staff
think,
can handle
well,
it.
it would be helpful to know what the library's principles are. And then I find myself thinking about a place like the Ned Ashton House. What makes it different is that there's no ongoing staff there all the time, whereas there is at the library. So there'd have to be a special staff person when the room's being used and so on. So we got to understand those complications.
Can do that.
All right, good deal. Anything else? I mean, any other topic anybody want to raise? Otherwise, we're going to move on.
Yeah, I would like to, going back to that slide number 59 from last Saturday with the key decisions, number 4 on there was replenishing the emergency reserve to $5 million. And so that staff was recommending that we, of that surplus, we take $450,000 and use that to replenish the emergency reserve. I think this is critically important. We have managed to maintain our AAA bond rating for 37-plus years. We are not a typical city that Moody's rates as AAA, being a college town with a lot of low-income residents, a lot of whom are students, not all of them, obviously, but a lot of them are. So just demographically, and with a large university, with land that is not taxed by the city. I mean, if you ever read that Moody's report, we are an anomaly in terms of having a AAA bond rating. And one of many things that is incredibly important to maintaining that is having a healthy emergency reserve. This is something that Jeff and Dennis started, I'm not sure, 2 or 3 years ago, particularly as they were looking at some of Moody's changes. Maybe it's been longer than that, I'm not sure. But I just think what that does for us in terms of keeping our costs down when we borrow money, et cetera, I think this should be an incredibly high priority to replenish that emergency reserve.
Jeff, you did not include that in your email to us. Was there a
Yeah,
reason?
I apologize. I didn't intend for the email to be the work session agenda. I should have been thinking in those in that way. What I wanted to focus you on were the decisions that you talked about before, and then I had made the assumption that any of the remaining surplus then would go to our reserves, and we would probably prioritize the replenishing the emergency reserve first, which is that 450, and then anything else would go to that municipal reserve so we can start to do some long-range planning for facility replacement.
No, I would agree with Susan on that, and I think the other piece of it is that, as you bring up oftentimes, just the interest rates that we can get, that is really translates directly in our ability to provide additional services. You think of that 37 years, all the generations that contributed to that, I think we want to make sure that we keep going with that. So the cash reserves is an important part of the AAA. Other communities have had some trouble maintaining where they're at, even some with AAA and throughout the United States, and I really want to make sure that we keep that financial resiliency so that we can, for future generations, make sure that they're in as good a position as we are because of those past decisions.
All right, so we're comfortable with that, I think.
Are other people agreeing?
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, I just wasn't hearing anybody else. I just want to make
that
sure
emergency
that,
reserve fund, I
Okay.
always resort to your opinion because I admire your financial knowledge, but I think that municipal facility reserve fund is also equally very important with
I agree, but
future buildings
Yeah.
needs that we have.
And I guess just from a standpoint of like, how do we figure out the amount for the municipal facility reserve? I'm assuming that once we go through the key decisions or these opportunities that we talked about, then whatever the remainder of the 2.95 million, we would just allocate there.
That's
that's
my
what you had in
understanding
mind.
too, or that was my hope.
But to me, we need to be keeping that municipal reserve, not just leaving it as a leftover. That really concerns me, that it is looked at as just a leftover after we've made all those other decisions, because we don't have a way to get $20 million for a new transit building. We don't have a way to get $20 million for a new police station or to build a new fire station or whatever. If we don't start building reserves in there so that we have funding to match federal grants, we will never get those facilities built. And if you want to go in a probably the worst city facility, go in the transit facility. And that is way, way, way overdue being rebuilt. And so I think it's, I just would disagree with thinking about the municipal facility reserve as being the leftover after we've allocated to the others.
Is there an amount that you think we should like target? I mean, right now, if we just look at some of the estimates excluding the Saxon Gilmore House, it'd be more than $1 million that'd be allocated. So,
Oh, I'd like to see it closer to 2.
okay.
How it's gonna be 2 and 2 is 2.9. We have only 2, I guess that the affordable housing gonna come out of that, and we're gonna have 1.9 million. I don't think that.
No, you've already got 650,000 in the affordable housing, so you're only looking at another 350,000 to get to that million.
So
You're not
it-
taking an additional million out of here.
So it is possible.
The 600 coming out from.
Right. So, no, I'd like to see us at least at 2 million. And I haven't totally crunched the other numbers. I've written some down here, but I haven't totally crunched the other numbers. But I'd like to see us look at a minimum of 2 million going into that facility reserve.
I think we just have to fund all the thing that the key decision we have, and I think the leftover can be go there, because this is my understanding after going back and look about this has been like for I guess 15 or 10 years. You've been thinking about this, and this is my understanding that the transportation department, they are waiting for federal fund, and it never been happen. And even if we put 2 million, how much is going to cost to replace do you have an idea to replace the?
Transit and equipment would be probably about a $20 million facility, and again, police, by the time we build it, you're probably looking about a $20 million.
Which means
Okay.
you need a $4 or $5 million match probably from the city. Is that ballpark right, Dennis? Yeah.
It's still, we need many years to do that. But we have crises here. We need to put money for those crises first, and we need many years. If we put every year 2 million, still we need more than 10 years so we can
No,
have
because
this.
with federal grant money, that's part of what we would be banking on, is we're getting that money, hopefully to qualify for those grants.
It still also is not going to happen tomorrow, and we still have something important than this right now.
Let's not get too confused or complicated about this. We've already made some decisions. Susan's raised a very good point. I think we have funds that are sufficient to do what she hopes that we should accomplish. So it seems to me we should just move on.
As long as we're going to fund all those, we can move on. But otherwise, I'm going to really argue and request,
That's what I just said, that
Yeah.
we've already made some decisions, about the funding that we
That's
discussed
okay. I
earlier.
just have to express myself. I guess that's my right.
True enough. Okay, let's move to clarification of agenda items. Whoever wants to start should start.
I just had a question, Jeff, on the 4A, the Civil Service Commission minutes, and it lists a certification of hiring list for position of police officer, and it lists like 150 applicants, 34 are on their list that they chose. Can you sort of explain what the process is on that they go through that, and these are just potential applicants, and then when a position opens up, they choose from that for the officer?
Correct. So this is the result of the testing process. The 150 applicants, at the end of the day, gets narrowed down to these 34. There's no magic number in the 34, but it's basically the 34 that the department felt comfortable with hiring. They remain on a list until we have a vacancy, and then we go down the list and offer positions to folks on the list. The chief does not have to follow that ranked order, typically does, but so for example, right now we have 4 vacancies, so we're vetting the top 7 or 8, I don't know the exact number, doing some extended background checks and whatnot so that we can make those 4 job offers here. And then the list lasts as long as it does. You know, if there's still applicants that desire to be a police officer with us a year from now, then the list is still good. Once we exhaust this list, we go through the testing process again.
So it's quite the process, and it was interesting, the breakdown of the number of females versus males and Hispanics and blacks versus white. So we get citizen concerns all the time about having a diverse force, but if the applicants aren't there, that's kind of difficult. So it's interesting to see what the mix is and how that process.
I think we ended up with maybe 11, 12% minority, which is lower than we have gotten in past. In the last 2 cycles, but still a decent number, and we think we've got some good candidates here, and look forward to bringing several of them on board.
Good. Thank you.
Want to talk about 8C?
Sure.
The park benches. I guess this is still remain like hot topic. Everybody send, talk about it on Facebook, Little Village, and also we receive many emails and many letters about this. Can you give us update on that?
Yeah, council has requested that we provide you some cost estimates for replacing a portion of the benches, and we are working with the contractor to do that. I hope by the next meeting we'll have that, but we're kind of at the mercy of the contractor, the bench manufacturer, to get those numbers pulled together.
Okay.
I have a question on 8A correspondence, the deer management. Where exactly are we on that in terms of sort of next steps?
We are working with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources to try to determine exactly what it is that they will allow us to do. So they twice last year in 2018 denied our sharpshooting request, and now we need to figure out exactly what they may or may not approve. So staff in Eleanor's office and the police department are talking with the staff at the DNR to try to give you a better sense of what options may be available, because we don't want to keep just going and missing the mark on this. So we hope to be able to get back to you here shortly, but we need clarification from the DNR first.
Is it your sense, are they categorically ruling out sharpshooting, or is it just you may get it into the future if you meet specified criteria? Because I got to say, within the last 2 weeks, there have been fatalities reported in the state of Iowa. Of course, that's not new, but that is my nightmare scenario here. And that is the most, a lot of people are talking about bow hunting. I am not in favor of bow hunting. I think I would probably go with some of our other deer advocates in terms of looking at a sterilization option, but I think I am really concerned that as the clock ticks here, that this is going to be an issue. So what's your response to that if you have that information at this
We're
point?
trying to figure that out. They certainly were not receptive to the request at the December commission meeting, the DNR commission meeting. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily firm, no way, no how, 100%. if there is any opportunity, maybe there's an opportunity to do one sharpshoot if we commit to sustaining the level with a different method. And that's what we're trying to really figure out. If it is a hard no, we just want that answer so that we can come to you and say, here's our options, but not prepared to give you that tonight.
That's good.
I think this is an item that we really have to take very seriously, because I think in the last few months we've gotten, I think mostly a lot of emails and letters from folks not wanting either the bow hunting or the sharpshooting, and for us to look at all options and alternative measures. And I think we really have to take this seriously and look at all those measures.
It was interesting. I just came across an article, I think over the weekend, that in Galena, Illinois, which is not that far away from us, they're getting ready to do theirs. The Illinois DNR has approved theirs. They have an incredible, incredible overabundance. The deer are starving to death. And so they're coming in with sharpshooters. So it's a problem.
Indeed. All right, so at some point in the future, we will get some kind of memo from the staff, right?
We just want to be as clear as we can coming to you. I think that's important for the public dialogue, too.
Okay, anything else?
I think 8G, the correspondence from Carol DePross, was interesting regarding Minneapolis and how they're tackling their housing crisis. I think it went along with IP8 of our December 20th information packet with the building statistics. It showed we had 104 single-family permits and only 5 duplex permits. And I think it's something that I think the city and the developers and those folks out there need to look at that, the other options besides the single families. And other cities are looking at that. And I think duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes is a good, viable option, and for the most part, it seems to be more affordable than single-family homes.
I did send a response to Carol personally. You know, the city has been looking into basically what Minneapolis is doing, right? In our South District plan and in our North Side neighborhood plan. So we're well aware of that approach. We've even initiated studies to move them forward. And I certainly am a strong advocate for that approach. You know, and we have on our formal budget, you know, the contract for Opticos to move forward, which, speaking of this issue, you know, I do have some concerns about the limited action that we're taking with respect to the north side aspect of the plan. But we are doing this, so I think we should be pleased that that's.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this is one of these issues that I don't think Iowa City has really trumpeted, but at least in terms of my tenure on council, I don't think I've seen a rezoning with a pure single-family redevelopment. There have not been many. They seem almost always to have a mix of multifamily, duplex, single. I mean, so there was a nice mix that we've been seeing, and so I'm glad that we're sort of ahead of the ball on that as far as that goes. But yeah, it's a good topic to closely follow.
When I first saw this article in the New York Times, I knew it was going to come our way because, you know, after all, Minneapolis is, 5 hours away from here. But the article emphasizes getting rid of single-family zoning. That's what it highlights. And you have to read carefully to realize what it's talking about is doing missing middle housing, which we have been emphasizing for the past 3 years. So if that's what the article in the end is encouraging us to do, I'm fully on board. But there's also one other thing that makes our city really quite different from almost all of Minneapolis, if not all, well, almost all, and that is we have really intense pressure for off-campus student housing. And that results in really intense pressure for new apartment buildings, which in the past has created huge problems in the neighborhoods surrounding the university because they've really undermined the existing single-family homes and sense of neighborhood that existed and have replaced them with something that's much more complicated, involving a large number of students living in apartment buildings. So that is very different from Minneapolis, which mostly is just the standard mix of single-family housing and the other zoning categories. So we need to always keep in mind our situation and not think it's exactly comparable to some other larger city.
And we also got rid of about, I don't know how many years ago, the RS6, which was the sort of the classic. We don't have RS6 anymore, do we? Yeah, but that was where you'd have one house per acre, the really large, so.
Okay, any other agenda items?
It was RS1. Okay, I thought it was RS6.
Let's turn to the information packets, December the 20th. I think I'll just quickly draw attention to IP number 2 and 3, basically, which have to do with the urban forest management plan. And it strikes me as being a very impressive inventory and plan. It rightly presents our urban forest as a valuable community asset that annually generates value financially and otherwise. It's also rooted in concepts that are based on ecological science and sustainability, and implies that we should think of the forest as biological infrastructure. These are concepts that I think are really contemporary and good. I like them a lot. That said, I guess I'd not here, but I'd like to know more about how the general public can be involved in fulfilling the purposes of the urban forest management plan, especially members of non-traditional communities, recent immigrants, refugees, lower-income residents, and so on, so that it becomes part of their city and they are part of the forest in a sense, right? So I'd like to know more about that.
You may recall that the Parks Commission created a tree advisory board to help oversee the implementation of this plan. Zach's in the audience here, Zachary Hall, our park superintendent, and we can certainly have him relay that message to the tree board and ask that they discuss that and get back to the council with some thoughts.
Yeah, that was something I have as a note here, is that I'd certainly like to know, our advisory committee's comments and concerns, as well as the general public. I hope, we do hear from them on this. I also, one of the more, in addition to what Jim has mentioned, I think our most pressing issue right now is the emerald ash borer. And so where are we with that? I know the staff, will be looking in spring to see exactly what, if any, changes need to be made to our the scope of our treatment. So as soon as that information is available, because looking at the inventory, I don't think that information is on the inventory that was just put online. At least that was my impression. So we can't get it now, and in fact, it may be changing, even if it were there. So. But it is missing, and so as quickly as possible, getting that information, I think, would be useful. The other thing I would mention in terms of just the draft itself, and it is a draft, correct? What is the status?
Zach, did the Parks Commission adopt the plan?
They made a recommendation to adopt. Thank you. They've made a recommendation to adopt the plan pending any additions from council.
So we would come back to you. Any comments that you have tonight, we can work on those.
Okay.
We'd come back. You'd probably see this as a consent item unless you wanted it on your regular agenda.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I would just want to emphasize, among the management goals, the resource management goals, one that's identified there is the tree canopy and canopy cover goals, and how important that is. In other words, what percentage of the city has canopy cover from its street trees? And that can be looked at either across the city or, at a finer grain. But in my view, that canopy cover measure is really the key, because I know we've talked about, we're planting X number of trees, and, X number of trees have been removed and so forth. But I think it was with the EAB issues that we were dealing with at the the importance of canopy cover really came into play, because in many cases, we were talking about very large trees with very large canopies. I walk now on my way to City Hall along Iowa Avenue, and, you've lost a significant amount of canopy cover along the south side of the street. So it's not just the number, it's the canopy cover. And I know eventually those numbers will be reflected in increased canopy, but it takes time. So understanding where we are with canopy cover, we scored low on that criteria. And I think it's important that we do better with respect to that, because that's the key.
I just want to make a comment that to thank everybody that was responsible for doing this, because it took a great deal of time and effort, and it was more than just an actual count of the numbers and types of trees. It really showed the community benefit of trees, and that, as John has been preaching for a long time, that it is a valuable asset to the community. And this study showed some of the financial value of the trees, besides just increasing property value and traffic calming and those kinds of things, stormwater management that we talk about all the time, that they have an enormous benefit to the community. And so thank you for doing that.
The urban forest plan also contains a pretty good vision statement, as does the natural resources inventory and plan that I don't know, we discussed it during the budget, earlier during the budget discussion. It seems to me, this is a sidelight, it seems to me it'd be good to have a vision statement, a comparable vision statement for deer management. And I don't think we have one at the moment. Maybe I'm missing it, but I'm not aware of it. And it would really be helpful to think through what the long-term vision is for managing the deer population, because it's around. Hopefully it'll be around for a long time, but we got to manage it. Thanks, Zach. Any other items in that information packet?
The 20 or 27?
Just note that the comprehensive annual financial report is in there, which I'm sure everybody read from
Word by
beginning to,
word.
yeah, word by word, I'm sure. I didn't. But just to point that out, that is a document that I say we, the city, thanks to Dennis and Jacqueline staff, typically get an annual reward for that, because they do such an incredibly good job with this in presenting the city's financials. So even though I did not read every single sentence of it, I certainly perused it and just want to bring that to the public's attention, because it's a lot of work, and
Huge amount of work.
yep, we got an annual reward, so I want to thank staff for all the work they put in.
Absolutely. It's a great job.
IP, I don't like these packets anymore. IP5, that's just where the things fall, was the tentative dates that Kelly had put together for council listening post. Were there tentative dates? Or,
Those are
No,
past
it's
dates.
just a
Months.
month.
Seasons.
Week,
But not
is that supposed to be for 2019 then?
The tentative, yeah,
Yeah.
week.
Yeah, I thought that's what it was, and I just went back and read it, and it says 2018. So the tentative quarterly dates for 2019 council listening posts, those weeks looked fine to me. I mean, I don't know if anybody else.
They looked fine to me. I have some suggestions, too, about generally speaking, possible locations. But we will, in the end, we'll have to decide where and when specifically to hold the February listening post, as well as who would attend. But with regard to sites, one that comes to mind is to meet with the U of I grad and undergrad students. We haven't done that as a listening post. I mean, I guess I met with the Student Senate with regard to affordable housing last year, but we haven't had a listening post with the students.
Are you thinking about something similar to that, or just a listening post, let's say in the Iowa Memorial Union?
Yeah, I was thinking of a listening post.
Okay, yeah. And I think the IMU would probably be a good location for that.
Yeah.
somewhere.
And another possibility, just to kind of think ahead, is somewhere in the northeastern part of the city. I looked over the list of places we've been, and that part of the city's not been touched on yet. So maybe we can try to set something up with the students first.
Yep, that works for me.
Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Okay.
We did have one at the Old Capitol Town Center one time. I think that was with you, John, and
Yeah, students were
probably
there.
half of the group were students at that
Yeah.
time, because that's easy access to the campus, so that's a good idea. The IMU would be a good location, too.
Yeah, that must have been like 3 years ago. Yeah.
I just want to thank Gustav and Austin for their letter regarding affordable housing funds and the riverfront crossings. It gives us food for thought as we move forward on decisions that we have in front of us here in the future.
Okay, anything else in the December 20 packet? All right, moving on to December 27.
IB3, the letter from the Housing and Community Development Commission about the 200. I know you guys mentioned that we will discuss this further. I don't know when, but I'm interested to know the proposal that the developer proposed to have like some unit, more I guess 3-bedroom and 1-bedrooms unit, for like more affordable. But I really would like to know for how long. Is this going to be the same like for 30 years?
Yeah, I was
or-
wondering about that too, Maz.
Yeah.
Come on up, Erica.
Good evening.
Hi, Erica Kubley with Neighborhood Services. The proposal they provided was for the duration of the loan with the city, which is 17 years. So they would be affordable at $450 a month for those 17 years, and possibly a little increase annually. And from there, go to the IFA rent limits.
And is the first one was for 30 years, right? The first portion, or all of them is for 17 years?
Yeah, the tax credit rent limits would be for 30 years.
Okay.
But the ones they're proposing for the city, the additional funds would be for 17 years, which is how long the city's loan is with the developer.
When you say it goes to IFA limits, what does that mean?
Affordable at the tax credit level. So they're considered affordable, but not necessarily to
30% of the
AMI.
area median income. I really would like to see more than 17 years. We are giving out like more fund, and we would like to see more than 17 years.
Well, ultimately, what the question boils down to is what's the best way to spend our limited affordable housing money?
Exactly.
And I must say, I don't have a really clear sense of that at the moment. I think that's something that Tracy and staff are thinking about in terms of the longer term, some possible changes in the affordable housing plan. But I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm not clear about that. So
I would agree.
I guess if we can invite the Housing and Community Development Commission on that day, will be great, so they can explain us exactly what they think. Maybe, I don't know, but I need to hear it from them too, as well.
Well, I guess my ideal scenario would be for the staff to come up with suggestions about what they think is the best way, the most effective and efficient way to spend our limited affordable housing money, get the biggest bang for the buck, and then to run that by HCDC so that they can chip in their own thoughts and then bring it to us.
I just wanted to clarify, HEDC asked the developer, for how much money could you reduce rents? So that was the developer coming back and saying, for $200,000, we will reduce to have 4 units at $450 for that 17 years. So that was what the developer was willing to do for that amount of money. So it wasn't what HCDC negotiated, it was what that developer came back and said what they could do. So if you want us to have a conversation with the developer's still going to say,
Okay.
I don't know if we're going to get better terms Because right now, they're limited to LIHTC, and they were already awarded LIHTC funds, and we've already awarded them funds.
Sure.
So it'd be the developer would have to propose something, and you as council would have to determine if that's what you want to see.
And also, Jim, you mentioned that, the point that you just made about how we want to use our affordable housing fund. Do you telling me that 200 is going to come out from the affordable housing, the 1 million?
Yeah.
No.
I don't think so.
Thought I heard a yes and a no.
You did. It's affordable housing dollars.
I think it's affordable housing money.
No. I really want the 100 with the 1 million so we can divide it. We can give the housing trust fund $500,000 so they can do also. I think that 200 should come from the surplus fund, the 2.9 million.
Well, I think Jeff, pointed out that the 200,000 could come from the unallocated land banking funds.
But the land banking fund at the end of the day is affordable housing. 20% from the affordable housing gonna go to the land banking. Why we want to take from the same bowl? Why we don't like expand? We need to allocate 1,000 and just we have 2.9 million, and we can take 200 only from it. That's not like really much, so we can just go and take from the 1 million because we signed that 1 million for affordable housing. You guys was just talking about transferring a house to be reserved, and you think that's too much money. I don't know what the university is going to pay, but maybe you're going to end up doing that, which is spending a lot of money for something. What our priority here? I don't understand.
I mean, this is an important topic, but I want to raise a couple threshold questions that matter for me in terms of what I personally think we should do with regard to this reducing rents for this particular project. And they have to do with bus service and schools. All right, so I'm imagining that families might live in these units with kids. And that members of the family will need to work somewhere, and they're lower income. So I would think bus service is important. So my question is, I didn't have a chance to look at our system of routes. Is there bus service? Is there a bus line located within reasonable distance of this particular site? And then the other question is, basically, which school district would it be located in? I think the answer is New Hoover, and New Hoover's pretty far away. The Koester School is Lemmy, but I think it will be in a different school district. So those questions matter to me. I don't know that we ought to be subsidizing, I don't like the word subsidizing, enabling lower income people to live in a place where they can't get access to work and can't get to school easily. So I need some help on that.
Weren't we going to get a subsequent memo on this anyway?
I'm sorry.
Jeff, weren't we going to get a subsequent memo on this anyway and discuss at a subsequent time?
No, again, this is not a staff initiative. This is something that the HCDC came up with on their own. We facilitated getting the answer. I'll give you my thoughts on it. One, $200,000, you're not buying any more years of affordability, and you're not increasing, or you're not decreasing the AMI restrictions. So if to me, the important part of that memo, which I just lost here, is that chart from the developers. And you can see where they're lowering that rent, and it's still going to families at the 30%, and then for one of the units, 40%. So the income targeting level isn't dropping either. So you're buying no more affordability. You're not dropping the targeted level. I really don't see this as a good value for us. If you want to spend $200,000 more in affordable housing, then I think staff could come up with some different options on how to do that. I just don't see what we're really getting out of this particular deal. There's certainly not a whole lot of value for the dollar amounts that we're putting in. Keep in mind, the city has about $1 million or more into this project already, whether it's through our direct contributions or through our contributions that kind of get funneled through the Housing Trust Fund. So we are heavily, heavily invested in this, and we're proud of what they put together. But each incremental dollar that you're putting in, at least I don't see a whole lot of value being returned with those extra dollars. You're not getting, again, no more units either. It's not like they're expanding the number of units in the building.
They are not. I saw they are.
Okay, anybody else have views about this? And we don't have much time.
I don't support the $200,000 for this project.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that it's a good move at this point. And I do think, Jim, as you were mentioning, it's important in my mind. You know, we frame this as affordable housing, but it's really a larger issue. It does have to do with access to transportation. That's a key expense. And so, in my view, you know, it's important to try to evaluate and move forward on our affordable housing from that broader perspective, so that it does include considerations of how available is public transit or other transportation options, because it's really about household income and what percentage of that goes toward household expenses, and you know, transportation and housing are the two big ones.
Anyone else?
I think, you know, I really also not convinced by the 17 years is not, I don't like that. But you just mentioned that the staff can come with something better than this for this 200, right? I really encourage the staff to come with something better for 200. And after that, we look at it, if we can do with 200 something better than what the housing the commission is like proposing, so we can go with that, I think. I don't know what you guys think, but I really need to move for doing something. I think like the 200 will do some kind of affordable housing. That's why I really was trying to encourage doing it. But I don't like the 17 years. I don't like that they don't add like more unit. But if the staff can come with us, just as Jeff said, let us do that.
Bruce?
To me, we've already made a significant adjustment to the budget, going from $650,000 to $1 million in affordable housing.
I think we have to. Rockne, I don't know
I'm
what your
comfortable with
view
where we're at.
is. Pauline, Bruce?
I'm not sure what Rockne means by.
Well, in other words, I think we've made the commitment to $1 million increase. We're already doing the LIHTC standards, our financing authority standards. I'm comfortable in terms of where we're at with our funding for this particular project.
In other words, not adding an
Yes.
additional 200,000.
Right, I agree.
All right, I think we have a decision about that. So we're not going to move ahead with lowering the rents for 4 units at this next project, right? Okay. All right, let's take a break now, reconvene at 7 o'clock, and then we'll return to the work session and the December 7th packet, 27th packet after the formal meeting.
We could continue with the December 27th IP packet if anybody had anything they wish to say about that. Any items in that?
I do just want to call out IP6, which is a memo from Julie on the Robert A. Lee ADA renovation project. If you had a chance to read that memo, you'll realize that we didn't some of our early projections were off, and we're not able to accomplish as much as we had hoped for. We are recommending that we move forward with what we think are the most critical improvements to that site from an ADA standpoint. That's the on-deck pool restrooms and making those restrooms accessible, or combining them for one accessible unisex restroom. And then the racquetball area that we had talked about before that we'd like to open up. into kind of a vanilla box and either use it for a community group or for our own programming, and then the building's fire alarm system. And that's going to get us pretty close to our project budget. The memo also lists updated estimates on all the other items that we have on our to-do list at that facility. So we want to get your blessing before we start to develop final plans and specs that those 3 top priorities that we identified are shared by you, or that you're okay with that.
I think obviously the ADA compliance items are important, the restrooms and obviously the fire alarm system, the safety, that's a big issue. One thing I saw in there was, an additional was the social hall kitchen, and I think we've discussed that before, and think that is important, that we need to include that in the budget. I think Maz had mentioned that, and several of us have gone to functions there, and it would be nice to have that kitchen relocated there. As far as the racquetball area, I think we need to make sure any criteria for whoever would be interested in that area would include a valuable use of that space, and space that considers our diverse population and providing public service to our population would be important.
Yes. I'm still really want to see. I guess I talked to Julia during the work session. I know that now we ask if we can find out how we can make our meeting room is available for some people. And I want to also see how we can have more people use the gym for all the recreation center, and as much as we can, if we can give it to them for free too. I guess possible option for that as well.
Jeff, what was the cost of the kitchen? Because that's something that I've wanted forever, but what was the cost of the kitchen or food prep area if we were to remodel that?
The catering space to the social hall was another $121,000, but that requires that we displace staff. So we have staff in that back area where the
okay.
kitchen would go. So then you have to add about another 60 or 70. So it's total about $200,000.
Okay.
To make those. And the only place to relocate staff is in meeting room A or B. So that move, once we want to do that, you're going to lose one of your meeting rooms at the rec center. And so it's a concern and something we need to talk through before we get into the next phase of the project. Or if you want to add that now, we need to have that value discussion. Do you want to give up a meeting room to relocate staff so that the social room can be a bit more usable? Keep in mind, one of the things that Latasha's looking at the senior center is the use of that kitchen there. We have some funds for her to work with an architect to really explore how to use that space. So it may be better suited over there, but.
I'm supportive of what the staff has recommended in terms of those 3 priorities. I realize and agree there's a lot of those other 8 that were not included that would be really nice to get done, but we don't have an unlimited budget and we have to prioritize. So I would go with the 3 that the staff has.
No, I would agree. And in fact, those 3 that we have identified, I think, are going to be really huge in terms of reimagining the racquetball court area in that area. So I'm really excited about all the nonprofits that will apply for that. Everyone knows who my favorite is, but we have to go through a process on that. So that's going to be really, I think, one of the first, as far as I can tell, assuming everything goes through with that, one of the first major renovations to that space, the Robert A. Lee, at least that I've observed. There's been some little sort of structural renovations done over time, but I think the community is going to be really excited in terms of what we actually do at that location. So I'm really supportive of that.
I supported it as well.
Me too.
Yeah.
So I gather there's clear support for that. Any other items on that information packet? Well, I guess I'll mention IP number 7, possible agenda items for January 14th joint entities meeting. So I want to suggest 2 possible topics. One is growth and management of CAFOs in the county. The other is legislative priorities. I don't know if y'all agree. I mean, I'm just putting them out there as possible topics. So.
In terms of the work session, yeah.
Joint entities.
Joint entities, okay.
I think the legislative priorities would be very timely. That'd be good. Excellent. And we've heard information or concerns about the CAFO, so that would be all. Yeah, I agree with those two.
Yep, I'd agree with that, Jim.
Okay, sorry, Mouse.
I don't know it's going to be like, item on the agenda, but I'm really like, I always think about the way that how the city can work with the county in doing some kind of affordable housing. Like, yes, some money from here and some money from there, and if we can do something together. So this is one of the ideas.
I know there has in the past been discussion about a building the county owns near the admin building. I don't know what their current thinking is, plus it's a different board now, so I have no idea really what the board itself as a whole thinks. We could put that on the agenda. I mean, what do y'all think about that? It basically would be a question, I think. Hey, could we work together? What do you think, Jeff?
I don't know if I'd say that's a joint meeting because you've got so many other governments there. That's really two governments.
Oh, we are not only the county and the city?
No, it's all the other
All the
small
city
towns
councils.
in Coralville, North Liberty. Well, if you're interested in that, I could reach out and just see where the county's at and report
Sure.
back to you. And
That's good.
Royce Ann's here.
Yeah.
She's here in the conversation. so-
Yeah, I guess she should take that.
Yeah, please do that, Jeff.
Okay.
Yes, thanks.
Any other items on that information packet? All right, I guess the answer is no.
No, the one thing I'll just mention, since we're talking affordable housing with Johnson County, transportation with Johnson County, is that something that we can set up a discussion about? I know we've asked staff to come and they're going to come and present, but, is it worth navigating a conversation with the Johnson County Board of Supervisors?
So in Thursday's information packet on January 10th, 2 days from now, you'll have a memo from our transportation planning staff generally outlining the regional transit question that you offered a couple meetings ago. We couldn't get that in last week, but you'll have at least some basic information that you could raise with the group if you want. But this is, again, there's only us, Johnson County, with seats in Coralville that have the bus system. So everybody else in the room is not really involved.
Let's get the memo and then maybe figure out where we want to go from there.
That's sort of my thought. And before you were on, I think we did this really excellent. We always talk about our one school board meeting we did about Horace Mann, but that was one where we did with with the school district and us. I wish we could do more of that with other entities, where this was actually us meeting with another entity, making joint decisions about a project of shared concern. So I think once we get that, to the extent that we can fit it in the schedule, I would like to do that at some point with the other entities and do more of that shared decision-making on those areas. But I want to get the memo first, is sort of my thought.
Sounds good.
Okay. Any other topics on that? Let's move to council updates on assigned boards, commissions, et cetera. And we could start with Bruce and move to the left.
I actually have none. I have a few coming up, but
Our meeting canceled. We haven't met.
That's all right.
We're going this way?
We were going to go this way.
Okay, that's fine. I don't have
I try to
anything.
flip-flop directions. Yeah.
That's okay.
Sorry, go ahead. Why don't you finish?
No, I said we haven't met. The meeting has been canceled. That's why.
All right, let's see. We already mentioned the joint entities meeting, right? And we already mentioned the work session about the CIP. And so the Partnership for Alcohol Safety is going to meet on Tuesday, January 15th at 9:30. 256 IMU, that's the student union, in case anybody wants to drop in. That's it?
Nothing. I had a JEC meeting today that I couldn't make. My real job took place.
Nothing from me.
Nothing for me.
Good.
All right, we're done with our work session. Thanks, everybody.
Vote to adjourn.
Very good.